Daniel chapter 7. Just a couple things to remind you of as we start this second half of the book. The book of Daniel is not written in chronological order. We've talked about this, right? It was not arranged in chronological order. If you were to read the chapters of Daniel in chronological order, it would be chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8, then 5 and 6. 6 and 9 really happened around the same time. We're not sure which happened before, and then 10 through 12. So we've already studied chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so we're actually, when we're going to chapter 7, we're actually going back in time. Remember, chapter 5 is the fall of Babylon. Chapter 6 takes place under the reign of Persia. We'll see that chapter 7 happens back in Babylon before its fall. And also just remember the structure of Daniel, kind of the second layer that we've talked about so often. We have the Aramaic section, chapters 2 through 7, that form this chiasm, and the Hebrew section, 8 through 12, that form another chiasm. And as we're studying chapter 7, it's really important for us to keep in mind that, those layers of the onion. So chapter 2 parallels chapter 7. Chapter 3 parallels chapter 6. Chapters 4 and 5 parallel each other. So if we want to something in Daniel that's going to help us to understand chapter 7, what's a good chapter to help us understand Daniel chapter 7? Daniel chapter 2, right? So as we go through chapter 7, and we're going to take our time going through chapter 7, we'll probably take maybe at least 4 sessions to go through, because chapter 7, there's a lot in there, and it's there's quite a bit of symbolism, and it's going to take a while to unpack that. And so we're going to be referring back to chapter 2, and we'll see that chapter 2 really is a key that helps to unlock chapter 7. One other thing before we dive into chapter 7 itself, I just want to mention that chapter 7 plays a kind of unique role in the book of Daniel, in that I call it the hinge chapter. And that is because chapter 7 is the last chapter of the Aramaic section. So remember, the Aramaic section starts in chapter 2. Chapters 2 through 7 are all written in Aramaic. So chapter 7 is the last chapter of the Aramaic section, but it's also the first chapter of the prophetic section. So remember, there's 2 ways to kind of organize Daniel. Narrative and prophetic, 1 through 6 and 7 through 12, and Aramaic and Hebrew, 2 through 7 and 8 through 12. And so because of chapter 7's location, again, it's the last chapter in the Aramaic section, but it's the first chapter in the prophetic section, and so it forms kind of this hinge right in the middle of the book. And we'll see that chapter 7 is going to take really a lot of the ideas from chapters 2 through 7 that are in that Aramaic section. It's going to bring those ideas together. And then it's also going to foreshadow some of the new ideas that we encounter in chapters 7 through 12. So it's a key chapter, and we really, it's very helpful if we have a good understanding of chapter 7 before we move past that. So we're going to spend a fair bit of time here in chapter 7. Any questions about this? I know we've talked about the structure of Daniel, the literary structure, quite a bit, so hopefully you feel familiar with this and can see quite easily how chapter 7 is kind of that unique hinge there in Daniel. All right, well, let us open Daniel chapter 7 together. Daniel chapter 7. Again, we are chronologically moving back in time. So in our last study, we looked at chapter 5 and the fall of Babylon. Does anybody remember what year that took place? 539 BC. Chapter 7 We're told in verse 1 it happens in the first year of Belshazzar. So that's the king of chapter 5 that sees the writing on the wall. This is about 553 BC. Okay, 553, possibly 552, somewhere in there. So this is about 50 years after Daniel has been carried captive to Babylon. So he's not a young man. He's, at least in his 60s, possibly in his 70s. This is 50 years after he's been carried captive to Babylon. So Daniel is already advanced in years, and again, it's going to shift, and now Daniel's going to start talking in the first person as he's describing these visions that he has. So let's start reading together. I'm just going to read verses 1 through 7 here of Daniel chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had dreams and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear, it was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth because between its teeth, and they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay. So, we've got a lot of strange imagery here in Daniel chapter 7, and we're going to start talking about what this imagery, how we can understand it. So, verse 2, I saw in my vision by night. So this is a night vision. So Daniel, this is a dream, what we would call a dream, similar to how Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in chapter 2. This is a vision by night. Behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. So, from Daniel's perspective, what was the great sea? If you're Daniel, you were born in Judea, you're currently living in Babylon, what would you think of as the Great Sea? Yeah, the Mediterranean Sea. That's exactly it. So, from Daniel's perspective, okay, so Daniel is, Jerusalem is somewhere over here, and Babylon is up in this way. So we've got the Tigris and the Euphrates and the Tigris that's emptying down into the Gulf of Aqaba. So Daniel's over here somewhere. For him, the Great Sea, he doesn't know a Pacific. He doesn't know an Atlantic. The Great Sea for him is the Mediterranean Sea. And this is going to be very important because he sees the wind stirring up the Great Sea. And notice verse 3, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea. So these beasts that he sees, they arise out of the Mediterranean Sea. And so when we start to try to understand these beasts, we need to recognize that Daniel ties the imagery of these 4 beasts, which we'll see represent kingdoms. Verse 17, verse 23 will tell us that. These 4 beasts are connected to the Mediterranean. And so the Mediterranean Sea, of course, it's bounded on the north by Europe, on the south by Africa, and on the east by the Middle East. So, that's the whole Mesopotamia, Fertile Crescent area. Why is this area important? We're going to see that the whole vision centers here. So we're not talking about Asia. We're not talking about South America. We're not talking about North America. It's this Mediterranean basin. Why is this important? Why does God focus the prophecy given to Daniel on this area? Anybody want to venture a guess?
That's what the known world was at the time.
Okay, so that's certainly part of it. So for Daniel, this is the world that they know about, right? I mean, he knows about some of Africa, but the northern part of Africa. He knows about some of Europe, but just really the part that's around the Great Sea. This is the part of the world that they are familiar with. And remember that the problem of Daniel is that God's people have been carried captive, right? Their unfaithfulness led them to be carried captive. Wicked nations are ruling over them. And we'll see that the successive empires that reign around the Mediterranean basin are going to control the area where God's people are. So these are going to be kingdoms where God's people are subject under their reign. So really the focus is not on so much what's happening in the world, but the kingdoms that God's people are living underneath, whose dominion they are underneath. Does it make sense? Okay. So let's start talking about these strange animals. So you read Daniel 7, and if you read it for the first time or kind of read it with new eyes, the very first thing you should notice is that we see these animals, but these aren't just like, you go up to the zoo in Washington, D.C., and you're not going to see this kind of stuff there, right? You've got a lion with wings, this leopard that's got 4 heads, this crazy beast that, it seems almost indescribable. It's got these iron teeth and all these horns, and, it's just something out of more of like a nightmare. So one of the things that we should be aware of is that in the ancient world, in the context of Daniel, these composite beasts that are kind of a conglomeration of different animals put together, this was something that was a very familiar sort of idea to people. So Daniel himself would have seen the Ishtar Gate. Have you guys ever seen pictures of the Ishtar Gate? It's one of the entrances to Babylon. It's got these beautiful blue glazed tiles, and it's got these lions and all these different animals. But this is one of the creatures on the Ishtar Gate. And in fact, if you look at page 239, Book of Daniel in Time and Context, you can see a picture of it there. This creature is called a mushusu. Mushusu. And can you see, what sorts of features does this creature have? What do you see? Okay, so its neck and its body is kind of reptilian. In fact, the Babylonians said it was dragon-like, right? So it's kind of got the body of a dragon. What else do you see? Yeah, so the front legs and feet are a lion's feet. It's got the feet of a lion. What else do you see? Yeah, the hind legs are talons like an eagle. Notice the tongue. You've got like a snake sort of tongue. You've got a horn sticking out of the top. And you can't really tell very well, but sometimes the tail of these is like a scorpion on the end. So this is called a mushusu. This is a creature that is associated with the gods and the spirit realms. Many times these conglomerate animals were seen as guardians. So they're often found on the entrance of gates because they're seen as kind of guardian deities. The Mushushu and Mushusu in particular are associated with the patron god of Babylon, Marduk. And that's partly because he was said to have overcome a dragon, and so the dragon kind of became his like mascot. And so these are associated with Marduk. So over in Assyria, they had something very similar. This is called a lamassu. There in Nineveh and other places, these would have the entrance to the king's palace. They had these as kind of sentinels guarding the entranceway. And so you can see it's got the legs or feet of a bull. It's got the body of a lion, actually. It's a lion's tail. It has wings, and then like an eagle, and that head like a man. And again, these are said to be like a guardian, protective spirit. Often people would have little ones that they would put in their homes for protection. And, they were associated with the gods and deities that the Assyrians and Babylonians worshipped. So one other example I'll show you, if you turn to page 147, Book of Daniel, Time and Context. So this is a golden kind of plaque that may have been like an ornament that was worn on the vest of a very wealthy person. We're not sure exactly how it was, what it was used for, but on this this golden plaque, there are all these animals. You can see it a little bit better here on the screen than you can in the book. So, for instance, here you have, this is like a griffin. So this is a lion. It's got like an eagle's head and wings. This is a lion with wings. This is like a lamassu. So it's got the lion's body, the wings, the head of a man, the legs of a bull. This is like an ibex, like a ram, but it's got wings. Anyway, you can see all these different combinations. Some of them have scorpion's tails and all sorts of things. And again, these are kind of protective deities that the ancients believed in. So Daniel would have seen some of these strange sorts of conglomerate animals there in Babylon, and he has a dream that's made up these beasts that have all these different parts. Now, one thing that we can kind of recognize is that, remember, in the vision of Daniel chapter 2, the primary thing that Nebuchadnezzar saw in that vision was we call it a statue, but what it really would have been to Nebuchadnezzar was an idol, right? And the idols were representing their gods. And the kingdoms, the different metals in that idol were, these different kingdoms. Here we have another symbol that's also connected with the gods of Babylon, right? And they're going to be tied to the kingdoms. And so we're going to see that in one sense, I think the kind of maybe the more subtle message here is that these kingdoms that we're going to see, these successive kingdoms, they're not from God, they're from men and, men's idols. They're associated with the idolatry of men. Any questions, comments, thoughts just about these composite beasts in the ancient Near East? By the way, in Book of Daniel, Time and Context, where we have these composite beasts from Ziwe, you'll notice that it's right across from Ezekiel chapter 8. The reason that's placed there is if you read Ezekiel's vision in chapter 8, when he sees the cherubim in heaven, they're not just humans, baby-faced humans with, very gentle, feathery wings. they're kind of wild. They've got all, faces of people and men and bulls. I mean, they're conglomerate or composite sorts of creatures as we would think of them. And so that's a whole different conversation, why that is and what that means. But something for you to maybe read up on. Okay, so let's go back to Daniel 7. Unless any comments, thoughts, questions about this? We're all together? Okay, so let's go back to Daniel chapter 7. And let's start talking about these beasts individually. Well, before that, let's maybe connect a little bit of the symbolism here. Okay, so go with me over to chapter 7, verse 17, and then we'll go down to verse 23. Daniel 7, 17. Notice what it says. This is where the angel is actually going to give Daniel an interpretation. And he says, those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth. And then if you go over to verse 23, then the angels continue to give Daniel interpretation. Then he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. So the angel is very clear that these beasts are representative of kingdoms, okay? So the beasts represent kingdoms, and that's not such a foreign idea to us. We do that same sort of thing, right? What sort of beast or animal do we use to represent the United States? Eagle. All right. China, do you know? What do they use? Bear. Not a bear. That's Russia. Dragon, right? France, so you might know France? Rooster. Yeah, exactly. So, there's national, representative animals for kingdoms today. And so these beasts or animals are going to represent kingdoms. If we think about these kingdoms as arising, remember they arise out of the great sea, then we can understand that these are four kingdoms that are all going to arise out of the Mediterranean basin, right? So we're not talking about China, we're not talking about Mexico. These are four kingdoms that are arising out of the Mediterranean basin. And in fact, if you look at Revelation 17:15, it'll, let's go there really quickly. Turn with me to Revelation 17:15. In Revelation 17, there's this other beast that is on the water, and there's a harlot, and anyway, Revelation 17:15, and he says, "Then the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." So you think about this, the water representing peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. But what Daniel sees is not just any water, he sees the great sea. And so the way I understand this is that these kingdoms, these beasts that are going to arise among the peoples there in the Mediterranean basin. Does that make sense? Okay, so they're arising among the peoples there in the Mediterranean basin. But remember, in Daniel's dream, is it a calm, placid ocean that he sees where these beasts arise? No, the winds are stirring up the sea. So there's turbulence, right? The water is agitated, it's choppy, and to me, as you think about this, nations conquering other nations don't happen in times of peace, right? This is happening in times of turbulence and war. And one of the coolest things about Daniel 7 is that it's a snapshot on a very interesting time historically where we have this churn of nations, this churn of empires that are coming on the heels of one another, and it's really a time of upheaval and strife. You know, we have this period of time where we have pretty regular strife that's resulting in empires falling and rising. Okay, so Daniel 7, very first beast is a lion, but how is this lion described?
An eagle's wings.
It's got eagle's wings? Yes. What else?
It goes on to say that the wings were plucked off and ended up standing like a man.
Right, so this lion with eagle wings, it's kind of, you think about a lion with eagle's wings, that's kind of a majestic, you know, sort of image, but then the wings are ripped off, it stands on its feet like a man, and then it says the heart of a man is given to it. So we are trying to figure out what nation or empire is this a fitting symbol of. And if you go with me to Jeremiah, I think we have a pretty solid clue here in Jeremiah chapter 4. Now remember, Jeremiah is a contemporary of Daniel, for at least part of Daniel's life and ministry, the first part. And Jeremiah predicted the Babylonian invasion. He said it was coming. He warned the Jews about it. Notice what Jeremiah says in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 7. He's talking about the imminent invasion of Babylon. This is page 729 if you're using one of the Bibles we supplied. Jeremiah 4, verse 7, it says, the lion, talking about the imminent invasion of Babylon, the Babylonian armies are coming. The lion has come up from his thicket, and the destroyer of nations is on his way. He has gone forth from his place to make your land desolate. Your cities will be laid waste without inhabitant. So, of course, Babylon indeed does come to Jerusalem and lays the land waste, lays the cities waste and desolate. And then notice verse 13. Behold, he shall come up like clouds, and his chariots like a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, for we are plundered. So there in Jeremiah 4, what two animals does Jeremiah compare Babylon to? Lion and eagle, right? Verse 7, it's a lion. Verse 13, it's an eagle. So he's comparing Babylon to a lion and an eagle. And then if you go with me toward the end of Jeremiah, Jeremiah 50, I think it's verse 17. Is that right? Yeah, 50:17. It's page 786. Jeremiah 50, verse 17, it says, Israel is like scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First the king of Assyria devoured him. Now at last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has broken his bones. So, here again, Babylon and Assyria are being compared to lions. Remember, Babylon conquered Assyria, and they really saw themselves as the successors to the legacy of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian kings often like to use lions as a symbol of their power. The Babylonian kings were the same. And we get it, right? I mean, a lion is a great symbol of kingly power. We even call it the king of the beasts, right? So here in Jeremiah, we see very clearly that Jeremiah is using a lion and even eagles to symbolize the kingdom of Babylon. So I think that first kingdom, Babylon, is represented there by the lion. But remember, what happens to the lion? Wings are plucked off and caused to stand on its feet, and then a man's heart is given to it. And this is kind of interesting, right? It's kind of strange language, but can you think of a story that we've talked about where someone who is like a beast experiences a change of heart, and now they are no longer like a beast, but they are like a man once again? Nebuchadnezzar, right? So Nebuchadnezzar, first he was kind of acting like a beast, and then God made him like a beast, right? He's going to eat grass. And you think about it, eating grass, he's kind of down on all fours. He's like an animal. He's wet with the dew of heaven. And then it says after the 7 times, he knows that God rules, and his heart is restored, given back to him. He's given the heart of a man again. And I believe that this description of the lion being made to stand on its feet like a man, be given a man's heart, is linking us back to Nebuchadnezzar's story. Now, part of the reason, and we'll get to this when we get into verse 9 through 13 and start talking about the issue of the Son of Man, is that here in Daniel 7, we are seeing a bit of a reversal. If you go back to the beginning in Genesis, who was to have dominion over the earth? The beasts or the men? The men, right? God creates Adam and Eve, creates them in his image, and says, you are to have dominion over the earth. Now, that doesn't mean they're to rule over the earth and crush it and to act like animals, but they have the leadership, the stewardship, the responsibility over the earth. In Daniel 7, it's the beasts that are exercising dominion, the beasts that are in charge. And so we're seeing that things are not the way that they were intended to be in the beginning. And we'll see toward the end of the chapter, there's this restoration where, again, we have this Son of Man figure who's going to reign and have dominion. Men are going to be reigning over the earth again, like God originally intended it, and not the beasts. And so I think this idea of the man's heart being given to this lion is kind of a smaller version of the big thing that's going to happen, meaning the dominion is going to be restored in the way that it's supposed to be. Okay, let me, questions, comments, thoughts about the lion with the wings? All right, so the next beast in Daniel 7 is a bear. What can you tell me about this bear? How is it described? 3 ribs in its mouth. All right. So is this bear a vegetarian? No. So this bear has just consumed not some soybeans or something, right? Where have the ribs come from? Another beast, right? And in fact, it doesn't just tell us ribs, it says it has 3 ribs in its mouth. And we'll see that I think that is significant. So this beast has just consumed, it's a carnivore, right? It's just consumed or conquered another beast, and we see the remnants, the ribs from that other beast or those other beasts in its mouth. Okay, what else does Daniel 7 say about this beast?
Raised up on one side.
Raised up on one side. Okay. So if you think about an animal or a person, and if you watch them walk, and they're walking raised up on one side, what does it tell you about them? Yeah, something's hurt, right? That one side. I remember 2 summers ago, I was out at my house looking at some concrete footers I had poured, and there was a piece of rebar sticking up out of the concrete, that I didn't see, and there was a drop down to the concrete. I stepped down. The rebar went through my shoe and very far up into my foot, and it hurt. I pulled it out and had a trail everywhere I was walking until I got it stopped. But for a while, I was walking on one side, right? So this beast is walking on one side. This bear is walking on one side, which tells us that one side is strong and one side is weak, right? It's not even that one side is strong and one side is weak. Well, is there a nation or an empire that came after Babylon that was partly strong and partly weak or lopsided? Remember, Daniel 5, your kingdom shall be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians, right? And in fact, does anybody remember what year Daniel chapter 7 was written in? Oh, come on. 553. 553 BC, Cyrus was king of the Persians, and that is the same year that Astyages, the king of the Medes, who is Cyrus's maternal grandfather, he sends an army against his own grandson Cyrus. At the head of that army is this guy named Harpagus. Harpagus it's in a pretty crazy story. He had lots of reasons to not like Astyages. Astyages had killed his own son and tried to feed it to him, according to the Greek historians. And Harpagus goes to Cyrus, but instead of fighting against Cyrus, he turns on Astyages, and Cyrus the Persian conquers the Medes. Now, the Medes and the Persians were related. Cyrus was, again, he's the grandson of the king of the Medes, but Cyrus the Persian conquers the Medes, but doesn't just annihilate them. He doesn't kill his grandfather. He allows his grandfather to not sit on the throne any longer, but live. He provides for his sustenance. And the Persians, under Cyrus, don't just get revenge and kill off the Medes, but instead they say, hey, let's not fight. Let's be friends. You guys join us. You're subject to us, but you will be part of us. You'll be included. And so it became this kind of alliance that's lopsided. At one time, the Medes were far stronger. They were the greater kingdom, but the Persians get the upper hand. They become the greater kingdom, and it's this lopsided alliance where really the Persians are leading the way, but the Medes are included in there. So you have this alliance between the Medes and the Persians. And by the way, as Medo-Persia is gaining power there in the Middle East, they conquer 3 other kingdoms: Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. How many ribs does the bear have in its mouth? 3. So I think those 3 ribs are symbolizing these 3 kingdoms that the Medes and the Persians conquer as they rise to power. All right. Is everybody with me so far? Okay. So we got the bear symbolizing the Medes and the Persians. And then we get to the third beast, a leopard. What can you tell me about this leopard?
4 wings like the fowl.
4 wings. All right. So you think about a lion with 2 wings. You don't want to try to outrun a lion with wings, right? But how does a leopard with 4 wings compare to a lion with 2?
The leopard's got 4 heads.
His leopard's also got 4 heads. Which is going to be faster? Right? The leopard, right? The leopard is a fast animal. It's got 4 wings representing, remember in Jeremiah 4:13, it says, you know, your chariots are like eagles. They're swift, they're fast. So this is a kingdom that is going to conquer with speed. it's going to conquer quickly. Was there a kingdom that came after the Medes and Persians that conquered with speed? Yeah, the Greeks. So Alexander the Great, the Greco-Macedonian Empire at the age of 20, his father is killed, Philip of Macedon. Alexander inherits this new Greco-Macedonian Empire, and he begins conquering. And by the age of 32, he has conquered the largest empire the world has ever known. He does it amazingly fast. I mean, I think about that. I'm 42 and I've never even conquered one single nation. And he conquers dozens of them, in just a matter of a few years. He does it just very, very quickly, moves down from Greece, down through Asia Minor, into the Middle East, Persia, gets all the way up to India, to the Indus River there in India. This huge, stretching like 3,000 miles, and he does it in like a decade. I mean, the world had never seen such quick conquest as Alexander the Great. So quick, it's fast. But it doesn't just have 4 wings, it also has 4 heads. Now, if we think about this, it seems like initially 4 heads would be an advantage to an animal, right? I mean, more teeth, it seems more ferocious. Yeah, maybe it's hard to sneak up on because it can look everywhere. You don't want to see a 4-headed animal in your dreams at night. But okay, imagine you've got a bowl of dog food, 1 bowl of dog food, and your 4 dogs, here you pour the food out of the container into the bowl, and your 4 dogs come running to the 1 bowl. Now, what takes place? The first dog says to the other, "Oh, after you. No, you first. No, I insist, you first." Is this how this happens? No, there's fighting, snarling, and there's competition. So Alexander the Great, age of 32, he's in Babylon. He had conquered much further east, but his troops have said, "Okay, we've had enough." He comes back to Babylon. He's setting up kind of his new capital and empire. He's there in Babylon, and at age of 32, we don't know why. Some people say he was poisoned. Some people say he got alcohol poisoning or malaria, or we don't know exactly. But he's on his deathbed. He's dying. He does not have an heir to the kingdom. His wife Roxana is pregnant, but he doesn't have a child yet. And his generals come to him on his deathbed, and the Greek historians say that Alexander's response when they say to him, "Alexander, what about the kingdom? What's going to happen when you die? Who gets the kingdom? What do we do?" Alexander says, "The kingdom goes to the strongest." The kingdom goes to the strongest. Now, is that going to lead to peace and harmony? No. In fact, what happens is Alexander's generals begin fighting, and what emerges is 4 of his generals carve out different sections of the kingdom. And for quite a period of time, the next really almost 200 years, you've got the Greeks are broken up into these four divisions, and the generals are fighting one another and very often at war with one another. There's alliances, there's at war with one another. So it's not a unified whole. It's divided into these four elements. All right. Everybody with me so far? All right. 4th kingdom. Notice that there is a longer description given to the 4th kingdom. And notice how it's described. What does it say? Dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong, huge iron teeth, devouring in pieces, breaking in pieces, trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it and had 10 horns. So there's this emphasis. There's a lot of emphasis put on showing how this beast is stronger, it's terrible. It's not even a beast that we can describe. It's some sort of, monstrous dragon-like something with these iron teeth. It's devouring, it's crushing, it's trampling. Is there an empire that trampled and crushed and devoured that came after the Greeks? And of course, Rome came and, conquered all around the Mediterranean basin, did so with, military might and strength that had not been seen in the world before that time. At its height, about a third of the world lived within its, world's population lived within its borders. So you think about the extent of the Roman Empire, you've got, let's go back. Maybe it'd be easier to do this. Okay. So you think about, come on, the Great Sea that Daniel sees. Well, there has been only one empire that has ever fully encompassed the Mediterranean, and that was the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire at its height ruled Europe all the way through the Middle East, all the way through North Africa. Just a huge, huge empire. And remember, in Daniel chapter 2, when Daniel is describing the fourth kingdom, the kingdom of, what was the metal? In Daniel chapter 2, you guys remember the fourth kingdom? What kind of metal was it made of? Iron, right? The kingdom in Daniel 7, the fourth kingdom in Daniel 7 has iron teeth. And the fourth kingdom in Daniel 2 is made of iron. In fact, let's go back to Daniel 2 just really quickly. And I just want to read with you the description of the fourth kingdom that's found there. Daniel 2. All right. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. All right. Daniel 2, verse 40. Notice this. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others. Do you see how that description in Daniel 2 is very similar to the description of the fourth beast in Daniel 7? The language is very, very similar. Crushing, breaking in pieces all the other kingdoms. And in fact, this is a really good place for us to talk about how Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, we can see a very, very similar sequence. So we're going to see 4 beasts in Daniel 7, and then what's going to happen actually is not a 5th beast, but a division. We're going to see 10 horns that come up out of the 4th beast, and there's this division. In Daniel chapter 2, we see 4 kingdoms: gold, silver, bronze, iron, and then we don't see a 5th kingdom, we see a division of the 4th kingdom, right? So you have 4 kingdoms, division, 4 kingdoms, division, and then remember we can see that they have very similar, the interpretation is the same. You start with Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, the 4th kingdom is Rome, and then we have the divided kingdoms. Remember, Rome is not conquered by another empire. It breaks in pieces. It splits in pieces. We talked about this a fair bit when we talked about the legs of the feet of iron and clay, just as iron does not mix with clay. So we see the same sort of division in Daniel chapter 7. And then remember, in Daniel chapter 2, the stone that's cut out without hands comes, shatters all those kingdoms, and then God's kingdom is set up. In Daniel chapter 7, we see the same thing. 4 kingdoms, a divided kingdom, and then God's kingdom. Exact same sequence. 4 kingdoms, divided kingdom, and then God's kingdom. In fact, let's go to Daniel 7, and let's talk about this last kingdom together. So Daniel chapter 7, I want to start with verse 9. And let's actually read verses 9 through 14. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the division and the little horns and more starting next week. But let's spend a little time focusing on this central part of the vision here in Daniel 7, 9 through 13. So Daniel says, I watched till thrones, now notice that's plural, that's not singular. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the flaming fire. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. So, again, you have these kingdoms, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, division of Rome, and then this final kingdom. And notice, according to Daniel 7, who is it that is reigning over the eternal kingdom that will never be destroyed, that will last forever? What is this individual called in Daniel 7?
Ancient of Days.
So the Ancient of Days is seated on the throne.
One like the Son of
Yeah, one like the Son of Man. So the one like the Son of Man comes with the cloud of heaven, clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given. Now, this is talking about the Son of Man. To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. So here in Daniel 7, we see this Son of Man as the one who is going to reign over this eternal kingdom. And again, the language is very similar to how that kingdom that is the mountain that fills the whole earth is described in Daniel 2. It's the kingdom which shall never end, which shall break in pieces all the others, but itself will never be destroyed. So we need to talk a little bit about this Son of Man and who this is, and what in the world is going on here. So remember we said that in Genesis, dominion, when God created the earth, when the earth was perfect, who was to have dominion over the earth? Man, right? Mankind is to have dominion over the earth. In Daniel 7, we see a reversal of that, where mankind isn't reigning, but these beasts are reigning. In Genesis, Adam and Eve are led to sin by what? A beast, a snake, right? And by the way, it very possibly was a snake with wings, right? Because the curse upon the snake is that you shall crawl on the ground from now on. So before that, it wasn't crawling on the ground. So it's kind of like a lamassu or something. It's like one of these conglomerate beasts. In Genesis 3:15, God says to that serpent, to that beast, to that dragon, Revelation calls it a dragon, calls Satan in Genesis that serpent of old, that dragon, says to him, I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman's seed. Another word for seed would be son. I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman's children or her son. You shall bite his heel, but he's going to crush your head, right? So there's this prophecy of a son of the woman that's going to come and break the dominion of really Satan, but in that time, Satan is in the form of a beast. In Daniel 7, we see a son of man coming who puts an end to the dominion of the beasts, and he himself is going to reign forever and ever. And in fact, what we see throughout the Bible is that there's this continual promise of a son who's going to come and reign, right? Or there's the promise of a son. So God says to Abraham in Genesis 17, in your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Meaning that somehow Abraham's descendants are going to bring blessing upon the earth. In 1 Samuel, well, it's not 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. Well, probably for the sake of time, maybe we won't go there. But 2 Samuel, God is talking to David. Remember, David wants to build the temple. God says, no, you can't. You've got too much blood on your hands. There's this whole message from the prophet Nathan. And God says to David, I'm not going to let you build me a house, but I'm in fact going to build you a house. And one of your sons, David, I'm going to put him on the throne, and he's going to sit on the throne, you guys remember how long? Forever. So go back and look at this sometime. 2 Samuel chapter 7. God says to David, one of your sons is going to sit on the throne forever, and I will be a father to him, and he shall be to me a son. And he will build me a house. Now you might think, okay, that was Solomon, right? Solomon built a house for God, built a temple, but did Solomon reign forever? No. And in fact, as soon as Solomon dies, the kingdom is divided. You know, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And ever since then, the Jews were waiting for this anointed son of David who would come and sit on the throne and reign forever. That's why when Jesus comes into Jerusalem, they say, Hosanna to the Son of David. They're waiting for this Son of David that's going to sit on the throne forever. Isaiah 9. Okay, Christmas season. We can go here really quickly. Isaiah 9. Turn with me there. Verses 6 and 7. Isaiah 9. It's page 662. So we're looking at all these prophecies or promises of a son that are coming. Isaiah 9, verses 6 and 7. Notice what it says. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And notice what's going to happen. What is this son going to do? And the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even how long? Forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So there's been this promise of a son who's going to right things that are wrong, who's going to crush the serpent. God, dominion is going to be restored in the way it's supposed to be, and is going to sit on the throne of David forever. And here in Daniel 7, we see the Ancient of Days, but it's not just one throne. It says thrones are set in place, and this Son of Man comes to the Ancient of Days, and to the Son of Man is given dominion. And the Son of Man is the one who's going to reign over the kingdom that will last forever. Now, what does the term Son of Man mean? One, the very basic, most basic meaning, it means human, right? If you're a son of a man, You're a human, right? You're not a son of an animal or a beast. You're a human. And that's the way it's used in many places. So in Ezekiel, God talks to Ezekiel. He says, son of man, write down this, or son of man. And he gives him a vision. In fact, in Daniel chapter 8, I think it might be verse 17, God says to Daniel, son of man, understand that the vision refers to the time of the end. Right? So Daniel is called son of man. It simply means a human. But here in Daniel 7, it comes to take on a whole new meaning. Because it's not just any human, but there's going to be a son of man, somebody who's born from the woman, somebody who is born into the human race, who is going to reign over this eternal kingdom of God. And when we get to the Gospels, can you guess what Jesus' favorite title for himself is? He uses it 90 times, some 90 times, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He calls himself this over and over and over again. What is it?
Son of man.
Son of man, right. So he only refers to himself as Son of God just a very few times. But he refers to himself Son of Man over and over and over again. Now, when Jesus says the term Son of Man, is he just calling himself a human? Or does he have something more in mind? I think he's got something more in mind. And I think one of the ways that we can know that is if you go to Matthew chapter 26. Go with me there. Matthew 26, and we're going to look at verse 64. Jesus is on trial before the chief priests and elders. And then notice verse 63. The high priest comes to him, says to him, I put you on... Jesus has remained silent. He's like the lamb before its shearers is silent. He's remained silent. They've made all these accusations against them. Verse 63, the high priest comes to him and says to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. All right? So he's placing an oath upon Jesus. You must tell us. Are you the Christ? Are you the Son of God? And notice how Jesus answers. It is as you said. Now, he could have just ended it right there, right? I'm the Christ, I am the Son of God. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, where's he getting this language from? Son of Man, sitting on the right hand of God, coming with the clouds of heaven. Where's the language coming from? It's Daniel 7, right? This is exactly what Daniel 7 is describing. The Son of Man coming on the clouds. He's there next to the Ancient Days. To him is given the kingdom. So Jesus, think about what Jesus is saying here. At that moment, does he look like the one who's going to reign on God's throne forever and ever, the one who's going to exert dominion over all of the earth? No. I mean, he was a captive to the priests. He is beaten, he's scourged, he is, just hours away from being crucified and killed, like the lowest, vilest, criminal and outcast. They're going to mockingly put above the cross King of the Jews, but that's not because they believe he was the King of the Jews. They're saying, this is what he claimed, and look what happened to him. What kind of king is he? I think Jesus is saying, this is how you see me now, but let me tell you something. One day, you with your eyes will see me coming back. I'm not going to have a crown of thorns. I'm gonna be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I'm going to come back. I'm the Son of Man in Daniel 7. I will come and destroy all of these kingdoms, and I will be the one to eternally reign, to sit on David's throne, to reign forever and ever. My dominion is the one that's never going to end, that's never going to be destroyed. All the Roman Empire, your little kingdom that you think you're building, all of that is going to be gone, and it's my kingdom that's going to last. Now that's a big reversal of what they're seeing right then and there, right? But he's making a very specific promise to them. You will see me coming back as the Son of Man in Daniel chapter 7. And so I think that when Jesus uses the title Son of Man, he's saying, yes, I'm a human too. I'm God who is, God with us. I'm come down and become a human. But also, I'm not just any human. I am the human that's going to reign with the Ancient of Days over this new kingdom. I am the Messiah, the awaited king that Daniel 7 has been talking about. And we know that in like the Dead Sea Scrolls, when they talked about the Messiah coming, they would use the term Son of Man to referring back to Daniel 7 to talk about when the Messiah comes and he's going to reign and he's going to set up his kingdom. And I think Jesus is very aware that he is identifying himself as the Son of Man figure in Daniel chapter 7. Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts just about that whole Son of Man motif there in Daniel 7? You guys are quiet. It makes me really nervous. Surely there's some question or comment. No? Yes? All right. So let's close with this. Central problem of Daniel: the unfaithfulness of God's people has caused them to be exiled from their kingdom and allowed wicked kingdoms to rule over them. We see this being described in Daniel chapter 7. These wicked kingdoms, right? The lion, the bear, the leopard, this dragon. So this is the problem. God's people are subject to living under the dominion of all of these kingdoms. And how does Daniel 7 answer this? What does Daniel 7 say? It says that these kingdoms will not reign forever, that the Son of Man, there is coming this promised Son that's been promised way back since Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman who's going to crush the head of the serpent beast, the serpent dragon. He's going to come, he's going to set up his kingdom, and his kingdom will not end. All these other kingdoms are temporary. His kingdom is eternal. And so we need to focus on, think about, live for his kingdom, because it's on its way. And of course, from Daniel's perspective, he was still living under the reign of the lion. The bear hadn't come, when he saw chapter 7, the vision of chapter 7. But for us, we're past the lion, we're past the leopard, we're past the dragon and the division. And the next kingdom in the vision is the kingdom of the Son of Man. That's the next kingdom that's going to reign and rule.